Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Mrs. Prema Janardhan, Vice Principal, going to talk to you on Module 22, Correctional Services and Crime Prevention, Learning Objectives to understand the role of police, court and prisons in crime prevention, difference between incapitation and deterrence, the importance of rehabilitation in crime prevention, community restraints to prevent crime, prevention programs in prisons. Introduction. Once a perpetrator of crime is identified, one of the ways to prevent them from continuing their criminal behavior is through the courts and corrections. This is based on the assumption that past behavior is predictor of future behavior. Programs in the court and corrections focus on reducing the criminal activities of offenders. These interventions can be classified into 6 categories, namely incapitation or depriving the offender of the capacity to commit crimes, usually through detention in prison or capital punishment. Deterrence or punishment that is so repugnant that neither the punished offender nor others will commit the crime in the future. Rehabilitation or treatment directed towards changing the offender and thereby preventing future criminal behavior of the treated individual. Community restraints or the surveillance and supervision of offenders in the community in order to reduce their capacity or opportunity for criminal activities. Structure, discipline and challenge programs that use physically and or mentally stressful experiences to change the offenders in a positive way or deter them from later crime. Combining rehabilitation and restraint in order to ensure that offenders make changes that are associated with a reduction in future criminal behavior. These are heuristic classification based on current programs run in the USA. In the 1970s, the strong emphasis on rehabilitation that had existed since the turn of the century gave way first to the focus on equality and fairness in sentencing and then to an increased focus on incapacitation, deterrence and restraint strategies of crime prevention. Today, incapacitation is the primary justification for imprisonment in the US criminal justice system. Since the 1970s, the United States has experienced increased incarceration rates. Among the developing nations, India is also one of the highest prison population. Incapacitation prevents crime because as long as an offender are incarcerated, they cannot commit crimes outside the prison. Crime is reduced because the incarcerated offenders are prevented from committing crimes in the community. A secondary benefit of incarceration is the indirect effect of deterring others from committing crimes because of the threat of incarceration. Furthermore, individuals who spend time in prison may be deterred from continuing their criminal activities when they are released. Most people accept the notion that crime prevention through incapacitation is a primary justification of imprisonment. It is also an accepted fact that some individuals should be incapacitated for long periods of time because of the seriousness of their offences and the threat they pose if released. However, the success of incapacitation in reducing crimes in the community remains a controversial subject. During the mid-1970s, interest in incapacitation as a crime prevention strategy grew in part due to the concerns about the efficacy of rehabilitation, rising crime rates and public fear of crime. Originally, incapacitation strategies were supported because of the local utility that keeping offenders in the prison would prevent them from committing crimes. But correlational studies examining the association between incarceration rates and arrest rates within jurisdictions have not found any consistent relationship between the two. Studies examining the impact of incarceration on individual level offending found a small but positive effect. In general, research in incapacitation effectiveness of crime prevention has shown that incapacitation policies prevent crime because offenders who are imprisoned do not have the opportunity to commit crimes. There are a small number of offenders who commit a large number of crimes if they could be incapacitated, a large number of crimes would be prevented. Issues that remain unresolved include: it is not yet possible to predict who will be the high frequency offenders in the future. Therefore, targeting them for increased prison sentences are impossible. Increased use of incapacitation as a crime prevention strategy must address the expected increase in imprisonment rates and the associated financial costs that accompany such strategies. Large increase in the use of incapacitation may have limited returns because the additional offenders not now incarcerated are lower frequency offenders who would not be committing many crimes in the community, thus reducing the return on investment for every new dollar expended. Large increase in the use of incapacitation may also have limited returns because offenders who are incarcerated for lengthy periods of time may be at the end of their criminal career and therefore would not be committing crimes in the community. True estimates of the crimes prevented are difficult to obtain because both the frequency of criminal participation and the duration of careers must be estimated. Furthermore, recent studies of impact of the increases in imprisonment rates that have occurred in the past 25 years have revealed that the impact has had a major impact on minority populations in urban environments. Other disadvantages of increased use of imprisonment strategies are the unintended consequences of imprisonment on the families and communities of those who are imprisoned. Deterrence. Deterrence strategies are based on early criminological theory proposing that sufficiently repugnant punishments will inhibit individuals from committing crime. Deterrence could be an expected impact of incapacitation, community restraints and challenge programs. However, this is secondary to the primary mechanism that it is expected to have an impact on crime prevention for these strategies. Here the programs classified as deterrence are those with the primary purpose of deterring either the individual offender or the offenders through the repugnant nature of the sanction. At the individual level, specific deterrence is explained by the fact that the pain generated by the punishment will serve to discourage future criminality. It assumes a rational choice model of decision making where the offender perceives that the cost and benefit of punishment are not outweighed by the crime. General deterrence refers to the impact of the threatened punishment on other potential offenders, thus reducing the chance that they will commit crimes. The major emphasis in deterrence is on the punitive nature of the punishment and not on reducing crime through restraints, discipline or challenge. Monetary penalties. Another deterrence strategy is that of fines. These fines are designed to be a fair given the difference in the economic circumstances of the individual offenders, thereby making this sanction more punitive than the traditional fines. In the United States, fines are used as criminal penalties in many cases. However, they are composites of fine and other non-custodial sanctions and not stand-alone sanctions, unlike in Europe where they are a major alternative to imprisonment. Shock probation, shock parole and split sentences. These are specific deterrence programs for offenders in use in USA. Shock probation or parole programs are a form of split sentence in which offenders are incarcerated for unspecified short periods of time in prisons or jails followed by a period of community supervision. The idea is that a short period of time incarcerated would shock offenders into abandoning criminal activity and into more conventional and law-abiding behavior. During their incarceration, there are no special programs for them and they are mixed with other offenders in the jail or prison. Scared Straight is another program designed to deter young offenders or at-risk juveniles from continuing criminal activities. They are taken to maximum security institutions where inmates tell them the horrors and difficulties of life in prison. Rehabilitation. In contrast to incapacitation, rehabilitation strategies focus on changing individual offenders so they will not continue with criminal activities. They seek to identify and understand the individual differences that explain criminal behavior and how interventions can be used to change individuals so they will not continue to commit crimes. They are based on psychological theories of learning, cognition, and general principles of human development applied to the analysis of illegal behavior. Psychological researchers emphasize that effective treatment programs must follow some basic principles. First, treatment must be directly address characteristics that can be changed and that are directly associated with the individual's criminal behavior. There are numerous risk factors associated with criminal activity. Age, gender, and early criminal involvement are some examples. In comparison to others, young males who began criminal activities at a young age are higher risk for future criminal activities. But these static characteristics such as age, gender, past history, while predictive of recidivism, cannot be changed in treatment. Instead, the dynamic or changeable factors should be the target of treatment program. Equally as important is the distinction between factors that are criminogenic and those are not. Criminogenic factors are those that are directly associated with criminal behavior. Research has revealed some dynamic factors that are also criminogenic: attitudes, cognitions, behavior regarding employment, education, peers, authority, substance abuse, and interpersonal relationships that are directly related to an individual's criminal behavior. Less promising targets for reducing future criminal behavior include increasing self-esteem without touching antisocial propensity or increasing the cohesiveness of antisocial peer groups. While factors such as self-esteem may be correlated with the criminal behavior, changing them will not necessarily reduce future criminal activities. That is, the criminals may have relatively strong self-concepts, but they may continue to commit crimes. Treatment programs that target such non-criminogenic factors will not be particularly successful in reducing recidivism. In order to be successful, treatment must address factors that can be changed and that are directly related to an individual's criminal behavior. A meta-analysis examining predictors of adult recidivism by Gendreau, Little, and Goggin found that antisocial cognitions, values, and behaviors, along with static factors, were the strongest predictors of recidivism. This provides support for the proposal that these changeable factors should be targeted in treatment. In contrast, self-esteem, depression, and anxiety were relatively weak predictors of recidivism. These characteristics are commonly targets of treatment despite the fact that they appear to have little association with recidivism. Also, important in determining whether a treatment program will be effective is the therapeutic integrity of the program or the need for effective programs to be delivered as planned and designed. Poorly implemented programs delivered by untrained personnel where offenders spend only a minimal amount of time in the program can hardly be expected to successfully reduce recidivism. Furthermore, programs must target offenders who are at sufficient risk for recidivism so that this reduction is measurable. Many offenders are low risk for future recidivism. Treatment programs that provide intensive services for such offenders will show little reduction in future criminal activities because few of these offenders will recidivate anyway. The final principle of effective treatment is the need to deliver treatment in a style and mode that addresses the learning styles and abilities of offenders. For example, more effective programs follow a cognitive behavior and social learning approach rather than non-directive relationship-oriented counseling or psychodynamic insight-oriented counseling. To effectively reduce recidivism, correctional treatment programs must be carefully designed to target the specific characteristics and problems of offenders that can be changed in treatment and those that are predictive of the individual's future criminal activities such as antisocial attitudes and behavior, drug use, anger responses. Be implemented in a way that it is appropriate for the participating offenders and utilizes therapeutic techniques that are known to work. And require offenders to spend a reasonable length of time in the program considering the changes desired. Give the most intensive program to offenders who are at the highest risk of recidivism. Use cognitive and behavioral treatment methods based on theoretical models such as behaviorism social learning and cognitive behavioral theories of change, and that emphasizes positive reinforcement contingencies for pro-social behavioral and is individualized as much as possible. Community restraints refer to increased surveillance and control over offenders as an alternative punishment while they are in community. Such measures are semi-incapacitation because they are expected to reduce offenders' ability to commit crimes. Example of restraints programs are intensive supervision, house arrest, electronic monitoring and halfway houses. Theoretically, increasing the surveillance and control over offenders in the community will prevent criminal activities by reducing both their capacity and their opportunity to commit crimes. Additionally, the punitive nature of the Sanction Act acts as a specific deterrence to reduce the offender's future criminal activity. To deal with the increasing level of incarceration and prison overcrowding, correctional officials in the United States expanded the range of intermediate sanctions that fell between traditional probation and complete incarceration. House arrest, intensive supervision, curfew, day reporting and other intermediate sanctions provide graduated punishments that were more appropriate than either probation or prison for some offences, and they maintained a higher level of offender restraint and accountability than did standard probation or parole supervision. In addition, intermediate sanctions provide enhanced levels of treatment or services for problems that were common among criminal offenders such as drug abuse, low education levels and unemployment. Finally, when used in lieu of confinement, intermediate sanctions may reduce prisons or jail populations and associated costs. Intensive community supervision, also called as intensive supervised probation or parole or ISP, combined direct contact between a supervising probation or parole agent with electronic monitoring and or home confinement and certain indirect methods of observation. The agents may also conduct regular employment verification of the paroled offender. Research has shown that increasing the surveillance and other restraints on offenders in ISP programs is not associated with decreases in recidivism. The increased surveillance of ISP is often associated with increases in technical violations of the condition of the ISP programs. Incorporating treatment into the requirements of ISP programs may lead to a reduction in recidivism, but this research is still in its infancy. Home confinement. Home confinement is designed to regulate and restrict the freedom of the offender within the community. The term house arrest, home confinement and electronic monitoring are often used interchangeably. However, it is important to note that house arrest, home confinement and more recently community control are terms describing the programs, while electronic monitoring is a tool used to monitor the compliance with the requirements of the sentence. During the 1980s, technological advances made it possible to monitor offenders electronically to ensure that the offender was complying with the requirements of the program. Unlike ISP, house arrest is usually a sentence given by the courts that are much more restrictive than ISP. In general, home confinement programs have targeted low-risk offenders such as those convicted of driving while intoxicated. However, more recently, home confinement has been used for paroles or other more serious offenders. Early research examining the effectiveness of the home confinement program suffered from poor research designs, lack of program integrity and low-risk offenders placed in the programs. Recidivism rates of the low-risk offenders placed in home confinement programs are usually very low. Halfway houses, also called community residential centers, pre-release centers or restitution centers, are no confining residential facilities for adjudicated adults or juveniles or those subject to criminal or juvenile proceedings. They are intended as an alternative to confinement for persons not suited for probation or who need a period of readjustment to the community after imprisonment. More halfway houses provide services for juveniles than for adults, and some houses specialize by client or treatment modality such as women only, pre-release substance abusers or developmentally disabled. Day reporting centers. They are more recent correctional options that require offenders who are on pre-trial release, probation or parole to appear at specific locations on a frequent and regular basis. Unlike the halfway houses, the day reporting centers are non-residential. Offenders are required to report to the centers, but they return to their homes to sleep at night. While at the centers, they are required to participate in services or activities provided by the agency or other community agencies. Structure, discipline and challenge programs. Correctional boot camps for adults and for juveniles are wilderness programs that are made of crime prevention in prisons that focus on structure, discipline and physical and or mental challenge. The experience of the offenders in the program is anticipated to change them in a positive way so that the future criminal activities will be reduced. The mechanism for this change is attributed to various factors such as self-esteem or increased bonds with staff and peers. Such programs also discourage others from committing crimes, or that the individuals who spend in time in the programs will be deterred from future criminal activities. At times, programs combine therapeutic programming with the structure, discipline and challenge aspects. Boot camp prisons, alternative called shock incarcerations, regimented discipline or intensive incarceration are correctional programs designed to be similar to military basic training. The early programs emphasize the military aspects of discipline, comportment and drill and ceremony. More recently, the programs have changed to include more programming and treatment, and many have de-emphasized the military focus of the program. Research has shown that the military atmosphere, structure and discipline of correctional boot camps does not significantly reduce the recidivism of those released in comparison to offenders serving time on parole or probation. In programs where a substantial number of offenders are dismissed from the boot camp, the recidivism rates for those who complete the boot camp are significantly lower than the rates for those who were dismissed. Exploratory analysis suggests that the programs incorporating components such as therapeutic activities during the boot camp and follow-up in the community may be successful in reducing recidivism, but this conclusion is tentative until more research is completed. Combining rehabilitation and restraint. Combining components of community restraint or challenge programs with rehabilitation have found to be successful in reducing recidivism of offenders. Similarly, correctional boot camps that combine the military aspects of the camp with rehabilitation and aftercare also help reduce recidivism. Conclusion. Crime prevention through the criminal justice system indicates that there is no one strategy that can be uniformly applied to all the offenders and all situations to prevent crime. Strategies that effectively reduce recidivism in the community are rehabilitation programs with particular characteristics, prison-based therapeutic community treatment of drug-involved offenders, incapacitating offenders who continue to commit crimes at higher rates. Effective rehabilitation programs are structured and focused, use multiple treatment components, focus on developing skills and use behavioral methods, and also provide substantial meaningful contact between the treatment personnel and the participant. Thank you for visiting the EPG Pathashala.